So I just saw Beetlejuice, if you could not tell. Um, and I have some thoughts. Now, I just to a preface before this review, I did review Beetlejuice, the original movie, and the animated series. I watched every episode in preparation for this movie, and yeah. So let me share my history with Beetlejuice. Essentially, when I was growing up, Tim Burton was a very important director for me. He was the first director I knew by name, or at least one of the first. And I was obsessed with all of his films that I could get my hands on. I love Frank and Weenie. I had a soft spot for the Alice in Wonderland one. I loved Nightmare Before Christmas, even though he didn't direct that one. But at the time, I thought he did. Like most stupid people who are very ignorant. I love Beetlejuice. Didn't like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And I was okay with Corpse Bride. But, you know, and I didn't see Edward Scissorhands, oddly enough. I'm not really sure why that one took me as long as it did to get to. But eventually, years later, I checked out all of his films, and I just realized this guy is not the director we give him credit for. I really love a lot of his films. He has a lot of highs, but he also has a lot of lows. And in recent years, I haven't really liked a single film he's done since Frankenweenie. Sorry, I just need some water. So, you know, I was very, I don't know, when I was younger, I wanted Beetlejuice 2 just like most people. But then when I got older, I stopped seeing, like, why it's such a perfect movie. And then I rewatched the first one, and I kind of got it and I didn't. Where, of course, I still acknowledge that the original is such a perfect movie for what it is. But I also saw the world building and the expansions they could do to this world. And I was like, ooh, maybe there is stories there. Maybe there is things to explore in this afterlife and things going on, right? So, I don't know. I was very mixed on the whole Beetlejuice thing. Also, I was like, Jenna Ortega, really? She's Wednesday. Just, and Tim Burton's been pissing me off in a lot of the interviews he's been given recently. So I didn't really know what to think. Of course, I'm such a big fan that I went to the early screening and bought all the merch at the theater. I will show those off in a different video on my second channel, but I had no idea what I was going to think about this movie. My high suspicion was it was not going to be good, but I was also hoping it was good, right? Because I'm a fan. I want things to be good, but I also want to be a realist with myself. So, in the end, I ended up falling somewhere in between. There is some things I really don't like in this movie, but when this movie works, it really works. So, let's get into that stuff. So, I think what's the things that really work with this movie, let's start there. Also, I will talk spoilers in this review, but I will warn you before I get there. So, if you still want to see the movie and know the movie without about the movie without spoilers, don't worry. You could just click off when I talk about spoilers. But I will speak of some things that plot-wise that maybe have not been shown in trailers, but they won't ruin your experience if you don't know about it, if you know about them going in. So just watch this video at your own caution. I think the stuff that really worked about the movie. Let's start with the effects. The effects are great. You know, there's obviously a lot of practical effects, especially with the makeup and certain of these characters' designs. Now, I will say, I really am tired of the interviews saying, oh, we went all practical with this. No, they did not. Yes, there's quite a bit of practicality here, but you can very obviously tell where the CGI is, right? The sandworm looks stop motion, but either it was a mix of stop motion or it was CGI made to look like stop motion, right? There's a scene involving a plane that crashes, right? And the style is obviously supposed to be stop motion, but you can tell it's CGI. So I don't get this bullshit that they're feeding us about it being practical. Say you went a mix of both, like why do you gotta act like, why do you gotta shed on movies that use CGI effects and then brag about using practical effects when you clearly did both and not just once? I don't really get that, but overall the effects were good. A lot of the makeup and costume designs look great, especially for a lot. Well, especially since you really notice in this movie more than the original. Even I mean, the original had this trait too that you really are able to look at characters and you're like, yep, I know exactly how they died. And so it got me to the point where I'd see certain characters and I would just laugh my ass off because certain characters were just like, you just instantly looked at their designs, knew how they died, and it was just a funny gag to kind of watch. And so yeah, and some of the humor really worked in it. Of course, Michael Keaton as Beetlejuice is the best part of the movie. Also, like Bob was a great character. William Dafoe was great. I'll talk about him more in spoilers. And I think Jenna Ortega, while I feel like you still could have cast someone different, I think she works for what this movie is going for, right? And and just the story about moving on from grief and stuff like that. I don't know. Also, the way this movie ends, there probably will be, because this movie is going to make a ton of money. Everybody left this theater at this early screening very excited. But when you watch this movie, and you get to the end, you really feel like this was a legacy sequel that wrapped up character stories and maybe made them, end here. Again, it probably won't be the end, but whatever. So I don't know. I liked some of the resolutions with characters. Certain gags were really funny. Now let's get into spoiler stuff, because this is the thing I really do. All the stuff here I really don't like isn't spoilers. So I think this movie is a Bill and Ted 3. Hello. Did you watch Beetlejuice? Do you want to talk about it? You're going to headbutt my suit? Do you like my suit? Why don't you not turn your butt to the audience and say hi? I don't even know how he came in here. But yeah, like, I think this movie is Bill and Ted 3 syndrome, where I like Bill and Ted 3. I think it's a fun movie, but there's way too much going on. Not every character needed a subplot, and that's basically this movie. So let's start with the main plot. Lydia, still healing from the trauma of losing her husband. As an adult, she runs like a paranormal show, which was a cool bit that really worked for that character. But she does that show, and she's still healing, and she ends up with this snobby boyfriend. And this snobby boyfriend was like one of the main things I'm like, this could be cut out. There are literally sequences where this character's like rambling on to Jenna Ortega's character, and she's like, cut the crap. And I'm like, exactly, like, cut the crap. Cut this storyline. Why does this storyline need to be there? I like the idea of Lydia, not being able to see her ex-husband, and it's leaving her with questions. Also, she's just clearly grieving that loss, right? That was fine. I really liked that. I liked that stuff. I thought it worked in the movie. But I think just the ex-boyfriend, the new boyfriend thing was just such a generic trope in movies in general of snobby boyfriends. It's in the Cat in the Hat movie with fucking Mike Myers, for God's sake. Like, let's not take anything from that movie. I joke, but like, that's essentially like what he is. And I think maybe someone making the movie thought he was funnier than he was, but like, he had a couple lines that were funny, but for the most part, he wasn't funny. He wasn't interesting. He did not need to be there. He made this movie run longer and feel longer. It just was like, okay. So her storyline I thought was pretty good. And then she's seeing Beetlejuice. And so, yeah. And then, you got Lydia, his daughter, Astrid, played by Jenna Ortega, who was having a rough patch with their mom, and then once they go back to their hometown to take care of their old house and things like that because the grandfather passed away, which they had to do because the actor died in real life. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But I think Jenna Ortega's storyline with this boyfriend was like another thing that I'm like, what? I don't get it. Because it's like, it was a good plot point to get her into the afterlife, but then when she's there and he plays a trick on her, that storyline's kind of dropped after once she gets out. Like, that dude kind of doesn't come back, and you're like, wait a minute. Like, what? Also, he's a murderer, and that's not really dived into. It just felt like, okay, maybe there's some missing pieces of that. And maybe we could use the runtime with this ex-husband, new boyfriend plot with the mom, and switch that around and maybe expanded his storyline. Rightfully so. I just feel like, okay. Like, I don't know. I really liked Lydia's mom, being in this movie. I think she had some of the funniest lines in the movie besides Michael Keaton, and she was great. But I just felt like it was really sweet how, even though the actor who played the husband in the original movie, I'm forgetting his name, is a terrible person and is in prison right now, he's great in this movie. Well, he's not in the movie, but his character, what they did with him is great, where they wrapped up his storyline. Him and his wife are in the afterlife. Kind of gave everybody a happy ending. And that's really the thing I think appreciate about this movie, even if it didn't work. It felt like everybody got a happy ending. There's maybe like a goofy tease of another Beetlejuice, but I don't think that's really a tease. I think it's just them goofing. And if the movie does get a sequel, okay, but I really felt like they wrapped up Lydia's storyline. It felt like her dealing with the trauma of the first movie and healing from that, and then her being able to come together with her daughter. It felt like all these characters had resolution in a way with each other, and that was sweet, and I liked all that. And I just felt like it gave the movie heart, and I was like, okay. I also liked how creative this movie was. So much of the afterlife was great, and you see so much more of that. I also think that Beetlejuice's ex-girlfriend was a plotline that also just did not need to be in the movie. Like, she was there, and she was funny for a couple scenes. I'm like, okay, like, why? Of course, Beetlejuice has an ex-girlfriend, right? But I don't get why that was a plotline. It just felt like, okay. I really enjoyed the black and white sequence of Beetlejuice retelling how him and her got together, very much in the style of like old horror movies. That was really cool. There's just a lot of great creative sequences in this movie, even when the movie doesn't work. Danny DeVito's cameo was great. Also, William Dafoe. I can get back to that. He was great in the movie. I really liked the way he died. I won't spoil for you. I'll let you find that one out for yourself. But he was great in that sequence. So yeah, I just think that this movie is very much a mixed bag. It's full of things I didn't like. There's a lot of plot lines and characters that just needed to be trimmed out of the movie. There's certain storylines that just did not need to be there. This movie is not that much longer than the first movie. It's an hour and 45 minutes. I think the first one's only an hour and 30. But you feel that extra 15 minutes, it feels like an extra 30 minutes, honestly, by how much useless fucking plot lines and storylines that were just like, because the storylines that don't work are not fun. Like the Beetlejuice's wife, ex-wife, that storyline was fun for a minute, but the more it went on, it stopped being interesting and it wasn't fun at all. The ex-boyfriend trope, but like, it just, I don't know. I'd say if you're a Beetlejuice fan, of course you gotta go watch this. We waited a long time for a sequel, or at least most of us did, I guess. But it's not perfect. It's a very flawed movie, and I'd recommend seeing it, but just lower your expectations a little bit. Obviously, it was never going to be that first movie. That was never my expectation. But there is still a part of me that sees how good so much of this movie is and goes, you should have cut the fat. Burton, I really hope this isn't a case where this Burton becomes like an M. Night Shyamalan where people are like, this is a return to form. Fuck that shit. He needs to make good movies in a row before we can call this a return to form. And I don't think he will. I just don't fucking see it. Let me know your thoughts. Like, share, and subscribe.